Metroid Prime 4 hasn't released yet. In fact, it wasn't that long ago development of the game was rebooted through the help of Retro Studios. With that being said, the Metroid series has a long history of excellent games. We will be discussing the Prime games because a certain boss fight in Anthem really reminded me of them and inspired this video. My name is Adore, and this is Executing a Tyrant. BioWare absolutely dropped the ball in so many ways with Anthem, but one place that I feel they succeeded was with interesting and challenging boss fights. Today, I want to dissect the Swarm Tyrant boss fight and talk about the reasons I found it to be such a thrilling experience. Let me set the stage. After falling through water and careening through webbed-up caverns, you enter a large chamber. The room is covered in dense webs, and a large object hangs suspended above the room, while stalactites litter the ceiling. As you slowly hover to the ground, it is revealed that not only is the room much larger than you originally anticipated, but it is in fact a boss arena with a large spidery creature like something out of the Metroid Prime series. It slowly lowers itself down from the large barrel-like structure housing it, and onto a large towering stalagmite in the center of the room. Then it spews damaging venom all over anything that stands in its path. This was the most cinematic boss encounter I've had in years. I felt it was truly epic and special from the moment I first navigated this dungeon in Anthem's alpha. All of this is scripted, of course, including the first time the Swarm Tyrant leaps from its new perch and decimates the exoskeleton of any freelancer caught in its attack. Once this intro phase has played out, though, the real fight begins. I would call this boss fight expertly crafted, given that every detail of the battle has been handpicked and tooled to ensure maximum excitement and challenge throughout. Occurring in multiple phases, you and your freelancer compatriots must whittle down the tyrant's health while avoiding stage hazards and every devastating attack that this brutal creature brings to the table. At all times, you must remain vigilant and on edge, because the Swarm Tyrant can one-shot kill you as she pounces around the room like an overgrown wolf spider. As a queen of the race of spidery creatures, freelancers like to call scorpions, she commands her hordes, which consist of both ranged and melee soldiers. These will attack you throughout the entire fight, but once her health is depleted to a certain level, each ad phase will start, flooding the room with every type of scorpion unit. Before those stages commence, though, you'll have a final opportunity to do additional damage to the Swarm Tyrant while she slinks away greatly injured and slowly climbs the chamber wall to hide out. BioWare smartly included this instead of making her entirely invulnerable during her ascent. To balance this out, if you're standing near the wall she intends to climb once she's been hurt, you'll likely be one-shot by her final lunge attack. The entire fight functions with a risk and reward system. For every advantage you have, a disadvantage is likewise built in, either by the fight design itself or by Anthem's own combat mechanics. Your ability to fly has several disadvantages. Many scorpion units have the ability to spew acid just like the Swarm Tyrant. She herself can cast webs over you, immobilizing your javelin, and the room is also full of eggs, and those explode on contact. All of these attacks will cause your exosuit's jetpack to overheat, dropping you to the ground with the inability to fly again, as well as inflicting various amounts of damage. During clutch moments, that could mean certain death. The other disadvantage is the fact that none of the javelins you pilot can fly forever, not even the Agile Storm. They all build up heat, and so you must monitor this at all times. Anthem could make changes to the Swarm Tyrant encounter, such as changing up the intro phase and adding different enemy units at higher difficulties. They could make the Queen's sprout armor at a certain part in the fight, and that could protect large portions of her body. Since Metroid Prime's bosses had areas on their bodies that were only vulnerable to certain weapons, a similar mechanic could be implemented in Anthem, where a boss would become nearly invulnerable to certain types of damage, but extremely weak to other types. A Monster Hunter-esque game called Dauntless does a really great job of this for some of its tougher behemoth fights. They actually did some of this in Anthem in the monitor boss fight. At certain stages during that fight, the boss retreats to various large chambers with elemental hazards, and thus he gains immunity to them. One more thing that could be changed about the Swarm Tyrant encounter could occur in the final moments when freelancers have almost bested her. She could summon flying units to pretty much make flying impossible, unless of course a squad burned down those enemies very quickly. A lot of these changes are really only for addressing unique challenges at harder difficulties, but variations could be introduced across many new boss fights in Anthem. Even raid-like mechanics, like needing to silence a relic quickly to avoid a room-wide wipe, or something else, could be added to future strongholds. I'd really like to see changes like these implemented, but before I adjust what I feel could benefit developers of the next Metroid Prime, let me just explain a bit of my own ideas for improving Anthem through live service updates, as well as what would have made the game pretty amazing on day one, as opposed to what we did get. The Achilles heel of the game at launch was not the bugs, not the weak dialogue, or even the subpar hub experience. Rather, it was a lack of content, particularly in endgame. It's hard to talk about Anthem, or any looter shooter for that matter, without talking about the recent smash hit that is Division 2 from Massive. The main draw in that game is its assortment of interesting missions, strongholds, and unique invaded activities, offering hours and hours of entertainment value while ensuring that players find buckets of loot like it's Christmas morning every day. Each mission in the Division 2 has a specific theme, so in one you might be fighting through a bank vault, and another clearing out a museum, complete with full Vietnam dioramas. While the bosses in both Division games are all just heavily armored and well-equipped humans, aside from that hilarious helicopter in the first game, the missions themselves offer enough variety and fun encounters that switching between the different factions, each with their own tactics and abilities, never gets old. The Division 2 has a very good endgame loop, with an assortment of activities that all feel quite rewarding, and its release schedule of new content is on point at the moment. Anthem had a horrible development due to problems at BioWare and significant issues with the Frostbite engine. I'm planning to do a deep dive video soon where I'll get into all the nitty-gritty details, but Anthem could have had a great launch, especially given it was in development for over 6 years. Despite the original claim that it was not a Destiny clone and in fact was being developed before Destiny, a media blackout of Bungie imposed by BioWare might have contributed to Anthem not learning anything from its epic competitor. What we received at launch was very much like original Destiny, especially in terms of mission variety. Somehow, these two games came out swinging with rote objectives like traversing a mission light on story and then holding a button before defending the point while attacked. Not particularly interesting mission structure. Anthem should have launched with like 10 to 20 strongholds, with unique objectives and epic Shadow of Colossus-like boss encounters. Given the excellent flying mechanics, there really is a lot of room for experimentation. Taking notes from Dark Souls would have been greatly beneficial, both in terms of setting up boss environments and crafting boss mechanics. Few games do bosses better than the Soulsborne series. I'd also mention taking a page out of Final Fantasy XIV's handbook of ideas would have certainly benefited the team. Figuring out each encounter could have been like a puzzle of sorts, and with so many strongholds, Anthem could have been both competitive with other looter shooters, which were soon to launch, as well as offering a plethora of options of its own, from missions to legendary contracts to clever boss fights for players to sink their teeth into. For a game that took over 6 years to release, that kind of substantial endgame is what we were all expecting. I would also recommend developers look to Metroid Prime and other games that have large bestiaries of enemy types in order to gather inspiration for adding additional enemy units and factions to the game. If BioWare intends to save Anthem, implementing such changes as soon as possible would be detrimental. Metroid Prime, on the other hand, is not a looter shooter. Far from it, in fact. It is an amazing Zelda-esque adventure where you lose everything within the first few minutes and must navigate a maze of dangerous locations filled to the brim with enemies and various traps and hazards. All along the way, picking up those items that you lost and new ones that offer you more powerful abilities required to access locked-off areas throughout the world. Some enemy types in the Metroid games can turn invisible, and others can grab Samus and quickly drain her of all of her energy, ensuring a quick death. Another thing that Metroid games are known for is larger-than-life bosses. Challenging bouts that many times require a new item in order to defeat, another staple from the Zelda games as well. In the first Prime game, a mammoth behemoth lurked the Phendrana Drifts. It was vulnerable when it breathed ice and fired projectiles. Sheogoth was easily defeated once you had access to the Super Missile combo and Plasma Beam. These items also help greatly against certain problematic enemy types that you encountered earlier in the game. While likely to be a first-person shooter like the other Prime games before it, Metroid Prime 4 could certainly elevate several of its mechanics. I think the things that Anthem actually excelled at were its traversal, excellent combat, and aforementioned boss fights. Albeit only having a few boss fights at the moment, Anthem still has potential to change that. In the next Metroid Prime, developers could implement a flying mechanic utilized through a unique new item and highly coveted due to the dramatic changes that it would make to later levels. It could have as much as an effect on gameplay as space jump boots originally did, since unlocking them gave Samus access to double jump and additional mobility. Since Anthem's javelin abilities, including their jetpacks, have cooldowns and therefore are temporary use, I think Retro Studios could strike a nice balance between giving the player too much power and restricting them. Metroid games usually make the player lean into their weaponry for successfully defeating most enemies. But they have certainly delved into non-lethal abilities and weapon attachments, such as a grapple lasso, for quickly dispatching enemies by ripping off their shields and jetpacks. More unique abilities like these should be introduced, and I think both Anthem and Mass Effect games could serve as great inspiration for crafting them. Technology allows for so much experimentation in any game universe, and I think the Metroid series has created a rich world in terms of lore and exploration. I would like to see technology evolve in Metroid Prime 4 to allow for additional mobility options like being able to teleport short distances or dodge moves like that of the Interceptor Javelin that we find in Anthem. A melee attack called Lethal Strike was introduced in Metroid Other M for dispatching downed foes, but I would like to see ranged energy strike attacks like certain Warframes have, or a limited close-range energy beam weapon. Think the energy blades from Mass Effect. All of this, I think, would bring new and exciting combat options to Metroid Prime that haven't been touched before. It would be nice to see the various suits like Gravity and Dark Suit return, but I'd like to see them implemented a bit differently, allowing for each one to feel entirely unique, with its own abilities, strengths, and weaknesses. Anthem's various javelins feel this way, and the game is very much a better game because of it. Perhaps these overhaul ideas would not need to be done to original suits like the Light Suit or Phazon, but just be the case with any new suits that have not been seen before in a previous Metroid game. As already mentioned throughout this video, boss fights have evolved. Dark Souls, Final Fantasy XIV, even Destiny and Warframe have incorporated raid-like mechanics and challenging puzzle-based elements into their most exciting encounters. I think the Swarm Tyrant boss in Anthem is a great case study for how to do a boss fight well with high production values and a great cinematic feel. Metroid Prime 4 should incorporate multiple phases into most of the boss fights and inject feelings of dread into the player through seemingly overwhelming attacks and moments in encounters where the arena is flooded with enemy units with specific weaknesses centered around newly collected weapons and items. The Metroid games were always good about forcing the player to figure out puzzles during fights, such as in the Sun Chamber of the Chozo Ruins. While fighting Flagra, shooting and firing missiles at certain sun reflectors caused the boss to collapse, allowing you to enter a small chamber in morph ball mode and detonate a bomb to critically damage the boss. Continuing to tweak these moments and adding similar ideas to those I suggested here based on my experience playing video games all of my life would ensure that Metroid Prime 4 is both unique and maintains the series' critical success. Despite the terrible press surrounding Anthem and the obvious difference in genres, I think developers working on Metroid Prime 4 right now could stand to benefit from taking a look at the latest BioWare title. As for Anthem, if BioWare fails to fix their game through its live service and decides to make a sequel, they could call it Anthem Prime, and maybe this time it'll actually be a good game. What are your thoughts on these games? Did you like my suggestions? Let me know your own ideas for making Metroid Prime 4 and Anthem great in the comments below. I apologize that it took me this long to get the video uploaded, but my dad is sadly in the hospital due to severe endocarditis at the moment, and I've been overwhelmed and unable to get much of anything accomplished lately. Please subscribe to my channel for more Anthem and Metroid Prime 4 content, and don't forget to ring the bell, because if you don't ring the bell, then you won't hear from me very often. Sad face. Like the video if you liked it, and if you didn't, there's a less happy button you can click, but you wouldn't want to do that and do bad things to me now, would you? Share this video everywhere, and as always, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Okay, bye-bye.